Today, we were learning yesterday about the concept of tshuva. Everyone can find redemption and rehabilitation, and so we saw a little bit in the Shulchan Aruch how you can tell if someone has been rehabilitated or not. Okay, and there are certain crimes that even if a person does tshuva, you can't, like if a person, for example, is caught selling treifas, you can't set him up in another kashrus situation because he's lost the community's trust. He's done tshuva, right? But still, the community needs someone that they can rely upon. So he may, I think the Shulchan Aruch had said, if he goes to a different community where nobody knows him, then that's a possibility. Okay, now in today's world, that's not even possible. If there's a scandal in Muncie, then the world knows about it. Yeah. Okay. Now, im hayu masrin bo, if he commits a crime for which he would have gotten malchus had he gotten hasra, if the witnesses would have warned him in advance. Perish afal pisha l'maisa lo nischayv malchus sharei lo hisrbo. In other words, what we're saying is it's not that they needed to have forewarned him, but rather, even if they didn't forewarn him, but mikol makam hol ve'etzem ha'avera sha'avar hi avera sheyesh bo chiyuv malchus misha masrin bo. But the nature of the crime that he committed is such that if they had warned him, he would have gotten malchus. Al keinu nifsal al yedei zeh min haTorah. That's what makes him possible. In other words, he's not going to get malchus because he wasn't forewarned, but he knew that what he was doing was wrong. Okay, ma she'ein kein ba'avera she'ein ba'malchus gam ba'hasra, af shehi asura min haTorah mikol makam eino nifsal al yedei zeh ela min derabanan uchidele el divrei maslo min haTorah ayin sham. But if he commits an avera where the penalty is not malchus, but let's say, he's a lashon hara speaker, you don't get malchus for lashon hara, because it's what we call a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, right? That person is still kosher for edus. If a person simply, he didn't come to shul, right, or he does other things that do not rise to the level of malchus, he's not invalid from a deoraisa view, but he still is invalid from a derabanan view if it's something that rises to the level where all of Klal Yisrael acknowledges this is wrong and unacceptable behavior, right? So it doesn't, like we saw many examples previously, right? In other words, up on the top of the page, a person who gambles, person who sits in the marketplace and eats with his shirt off, or whatever, yeah, right. Okay. All right, next. So masrin bo shnei edim. So lav davka, you don't need to have, the halach is not that both witnesses have to forewarn him. Shaharei kasav harambam debein shehisra bo echad min ha'edim ubein shehisra bo echad b'fnei ha'edim havi hasra. Forewarning is necessary in order for a person to be punished in court, but only one person has to forewarn him. It doesn't even have to be one of the two witnesses. So it's just the language that we use in halacha. Masrin bo, we warn him, but it's not. V'tzarach lamer de kavana. So im hayu masrin bo b'fnei shnei edim. That if we would have forewarned him in front of two witnesses, then he would have gotten malchus. So that's just the technical issue. Let's take a look at some of the likutim on the bottom. Mitzvahs aseh. If a person violates only a positive commandment, lo nifsal le'edus, he does not become disqualified. Welcome back, Izzy. He does not become disqualified. Chutz imhu porek ol legamre, unless he completely expresses apostasy. Like basically he says, I don't believe in any of this stuff anymore. It's all baloney. I got friends who tell me that. I guess they feel we're old friends. I can tell you this is all baloney. V'yesh cholkim, and others disagree. Ziev shtaros, or Zayev shtaros, pasul le'edus lioso gazlan. If a person is a forger of documents, So even if he has committed no crime, but he helps and aids and abets others to counterfeit, a counterfeiter, he's puzzled for aidus because he's a gazlan. Because the very nature of counterfeiting is to pass yourself off for something else and to take something that's not yours. Well, you have to identify from a halachic standpoint. He says, even if a person hasn't yet perpetrated the crime, all he's done is he's counterfeited documents. And I'll give you an example. I told you that case that I was involved in where this other charity produced forged documents. They lost their case in Beis Din. But does that mean, okay, so you guys are now kosher still, you, Rabbi so-and-so, you're still kosher le'edus? No, he's not kosher le'edus anymore because he tried to. The Beis Din didn't accept it, but the fact that you even made the attempt to do so, anyone who counterfeits documents, even if they haven't yet been able to perpetrate a crime, they're going to be pasul for edus. Hakofer b'fikadon pasul le'edus. If a person denies a pikadon, like if he denies owing something that he had borrowed, he's by definition pasul le'edus. So if a person, like Reuben lends Shimon his lawnmower or his pruning shears, and then Reuben says, do you mind returning them back to me? He says, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have your pruning shears. And it's clear that he's lying. And he knows that he's lying. And in other words, or I'm not giving them back to you. He says, I bought them, right? Or whatever. So he's pasul le'edus. Eno kofer mamish rak ma'akvo madcho klach vasho v'yesh omrim delo nifsal. But what if he owes something back to Reuven? Shimon owes something to Reuven, and he says, yeah, I know I owe you. Come back next week. I don't have it with me right now. And he keeps delaying. He's a jerk, but he's not pasul le'edus. Okay. Yeah, jerk. Gimel, Reish, Kuf. Jerk. Yeah. If you borrow and you don't pay, you are pasul le'edus. If you borrow and you say, I don't have it now, come back next week, then you're not pasul. If you keep pushing him on. Mañana. Okay. Aval im yesh litlos sha'asa bishgaga o betos shelo yada ha'isr lenafso klal le'edus afilu midivrei sofrim. If a person, like in our example, he genuinely forgot that those pruning shears are yours, and he really thinks that he bought them, and so then he's not pasul le'edus for that. Or if a person thinks that what he did was not usser, right? So then he doesn't become pasul le'edus. He may be ignorant, he may be foolish, he may be a lot of things, but he's not a Russia. He's just, he's mistaken. Okay. So the Imrei Yaakov says, Dafka kisheinu lefanenu, aval imhu lefanenu, yesh delo talinan ela sholim oso. He says, this is only, in other words, when we give a person the benefit of the doubt that he didn't know what he was doing or he did it b'shogeg, that's only if he didn't do it in front of us. But if we see him walking out of McDonald's with grease running down his mouth, and yeah, fries have beef fat. The fries are probably the most treif part of McDonald's. People don't realize that. A friend of mine, when I was a teenager, a friend of mine said, I know there's nothing treif in them, and he convinced me to eat one of the McDonald's French fries. The only time I think I've eaten treif in my life. And they were amazing. The most amazing French fries I've had. I never knew that French fries could taste that good. And it was later that I discovered that they use beef tallow when they fry them. And that's the secret to why they taste so good. So anyway, So he's got the grease running down his face, and so we see him doing something in front of us. Then you can't say, "Oh, he didn't know," right? You have to ask him. V'im eno meshiv she'asa b'shkaga posel also, and if he doesn't say, "Oh, I didn't know," then, or if it's obvious that he knows, so then you make him puzzle. In other words, there's only so far that it's credible that he's doing something b'shogeg, right? That's the point. Yes, Ron.
Actually, last time that remember what you always have to judge favorably.
Not, I wouldn't say always. I would say generally. Always is too extreme of a word, because there are certain situations where it's not credible to judge him favorably. Well, go back to his wording. If the Rambam may say that if you see a situation that can be judged favorably, you always must judge favorably. I don't know the language of the Rambam. Yeah. Okay. In other words, there are certain situations. Yes, if you see a guy walking out of McDonald's and he's not chewing on a cheeseburger, so then could have maybe used the washroom, maybe he wanted to get a coffee. That's fine. I bought a coffee from McDonald's myself. Yeah, so I don't think so anymore today, because there are plenty of things that there are plenty of reasons you could walk into a McDonald's today. Yeah, I mean, it's like
big difference between.
No, the difference would be is that Starbucks, the majority of their items, or their main item is kosher, but with McDonald's, their main food items are treif, right? Pretty much all of them except the coffee, I would guess. Yeah. Okay. But there are situations where it's the only place you can get a coffee at that hour or whatever. Yeah, you could be an Uber Eats driver. Yeah, with the yarmulke. An interesting question whether you're allowed to be an Uber Eats driver if you're delivering to Jewish customers. No, but you are facilitating a Jew to eat treif. So I think it's a serious question in halacha whether you'd be allowed to be an Uber Eats driver.
Somebody else, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's go. Ches. Ches. Let me just see here. Okay. Aser litol schar leilech lahayid beveistin mashara akvar. He says it is aser for you to take compensation to appear before Beis Din and testify. Shaharei hu mechuyev bazeh min haTorah. Because the Torah obligates you. If you have witnessed something that will help another Jew, you're obligated to. You're obligated to take off time from work without compensation and testify in Beis Din. Va'asr litol schar al kiyum hamitzvos. And you're not allowed to take compensation for doing a mitzvah. It's your mitzvah. You can't demand compensation. So of course you could ask, well, how can I be paid for teaching Torah? That's a good question. The poskim discuss this. Aval muter litol schar leilech lirota inyan kidei sheyihiya eid bedavar achar kach. But what you are allowed to take compensation for is if someone says, will you do me a favor? I need a witness for a transaction. Okay. So you say, so you want me to come all the way out to Yehupitzville? You want me to come out to Barry because you need to buy a piece of real estate and you need a witness, right? I got to take off a half a day of work to do that. You're entitled to take compensation. He's not asking you to testify in Beis Din. He's asking you to be a witness so that in the future, if you need to testify, that you're allowed to be compensated for. You're under no obligation to act as a witness if someone asks you to. You can certainly decline and say, "I'd rather not." Okay. And it's for that reason that people who are called upon to come to Beis Din to be part of a get, because and this is what the Gittin Beis Din does, is that they hire a sofer, okay, they hire 2 witnesses to act as witnesses on the get. They get compensated an hourly wage. That's why the Beis Din is entitled to get paid for writing a get. Today in Toronto, I think still the going price is about $700 to have the Beis Din write a get. That and right. And by the way, that's a bargain. It's a bargain. They should be charging twice that much for the amount of labor and the amount of people that are involved in this transaction, for the time it takes. You need the sofer, you need the Beis Din, and you need the 2 witnesses. And it usually takes 2 to 3 hours to do it. So where else can you employ what did I just say, 6 people for 2 hours for $700? Professionals, okay, people who are doing very skilled work that most people are not even knowledgeable enough to be able to do. So, and like you said, Paul, it's probably the least expensive part of going through a divorce. You'd be surprised in how many people say, "I'm not paying for that," right? Because yeah, right. That's your job, right? All right. Well, but a ketubah has flowers.
Daggers and
It's Hebrew, but it's a very specific kind of. You can very clearly tell what is a get and what is not a get. Okay, a lot of halachas involved in how to write a get. Very intricate, by the way. Yes, we did say that. So let's take a look. Maybe we'll be able to qualify that. Is it true that I'm not allowed to be compensated at all, or I'm just not allowed to be paid for my testimony? What about the time that I have to take off of work? What about yeah, well, I'm not sure about that, but what about transportation costs? Okay, so we will take a look. But we'll go even one step further. If a person does take compensation to testify, his testimony is invalid. And that's true also about a dayan. If a judge says, I'll hear your case, this is what you have to pay me, all of his judgment is batel. And they don't even need to have a hearing about it or to make a complaint about it. It's de facto batel. Anytime a witness is paid or a judge is paid, the judgment is null and void. If, however, the judge or the witness returns the money, then the case is upheld. This is unlike other disqualifications where if a person does it, then just returning the lost money does not make everything better. Like if I stole and I say, okay, I'll return the money, that does not make me clear of Geneva. I have to do tshuva as well. Because this is only a rabbinic penalty. The rabbis imposed a penalty that no one should be allowed to take compensation for either judging or testifying. It's not a deoraisa psul, it's a derabanan psul, because they saw that it had a corrosive effect, that it was corrupting judgments and testimonies, right? But midioraisa, even if you do take compensation, your edus or your judgment is valid. Now, leilech lahoid beveistin should be, let's see. Okay, leilech lahoid beveistin should be iro. Notice that the language was, in the parentheses, we skipped the parentheses. Beveistin should be iro. You have to, you're not allowed to take compensation to testify in the Beis-Din that's in your city. Now, why is that word added? That extra word implies that if you have to take off time and travel to another city, you are allowed to take compensation. And it doesn't even mean necessarily a different city. Let's say I have to go all the way down to well, that's a different city, but let's say, let's have to go to Union Station, right, or somewhere around there, like downtown Toronto. That's a pain in the neck. It's a pain in the neck to get down there. I'm allowed to take compensation if there is a burden involved in my getting there. Others disagree, and they say that if there's just a schlep, then you're still not allowed to take compensation, as long as there's no cost. Since you've already seen a transaction, you now have an obligation to testify, no matter how much of a schlep, no matter how much burden is involved. Now, we haven't talked about cost. You should be entitled to recoup the cost of your travel. That's something that hopefully he'll mention momentarily. It's a very good question. We'll have to see. I don't know whether he's going to point it out to us, but it would seem that either the court pays it and then collects it from both sides. That's just court, as the cost of the case, or it could be that maybe it's even permitted to take compensation directly from the person on whose behalf you're testifying. We'll see. Mechuyev bazem in haTorah, you're obligated midioraisa to testify. Mashma de b'mitzvah de rabbanan shori likach schar. It sounds like when there's only a rabbinic commandment to do something, you are allowed to take compensation. He says, according to that, if we were to argue that, let's say a person is only a sole singular witness, then he's not, some people maintain that you're not obligated to testify midioraisa, you only have a rabbinical obligation to testify. So this would only apply if there are two witnesses. So that's not so clear to me. Okay. You're not allowed to take compensation for fulfilling a mitzvah. So this is based on a Gemara in Bechoros. It says in the Torah, behold, I have taught you the proper mitzvos, the proper statutes. Ma'ani bechinam, af atem bechinam. And so why does God say that I have taught you? What Hashem is basically saying is, you have to be like me. Just like I give you this whole world and I give you the Torah for free, you have to also put the Torah into practice for free. You're not allowed to take compensation for doing what the Torah commands you to do. If a person chooses to give you a gift after the fact for doing him a favor, he says, I've discussed this previously in Siman Hey Seif Gimel. And I think we said over there that it's okay. Of course, remember, I don't know if you recall, but when we learned about the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, a person does get benefit from even doing the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, because while they're watching a lost item, they don't have to attend to give someone tzedakah. So you are allowed to, in certain ways, benefit from doing a mitzvah, and you're also not. And we also learned in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda that you are allowed to take compensation for time off from work and expenses. That you are allowed to, and that's why we learned when we learned the laws of Hashavas Aveda, we said that if the expenses in caring for the lost object exceed the value of the object, then you should sell the object and then hold on to the money until the owner comes along. So clearly, you're not allowed, you're not obligated to, hopefully he'll mention this, but I don't see it yet. You are perfectly entitled to be remunerated any out-of-pocket expenses that you incur in doing the mitzvah of edus. You can say, I have expenses, my plane ticket. I'm also entitled to be compensated for time lost from work. You pay a person like a poel botel. Remember, we learned how much would a person take for taking off the day, for taking the day off and not having to do the work that he normally does. That's what he is entitled to be compensated for. He's entitled to be compensated for his time, even though he's not entitled to be compensated for the actual testimony that he is giving. So, for example, I was once, a few times I've been asked to adjudicate over cases as a sole judge. And I basically say, okay, here's my fee, but it's really to make sure that the litigants understand that they can't schlep this out indefinitely, gives them an incentive to move expeditiously through the case. And it also lets them know that I'm entitled to compensation for my time. I usually, what I've done in the past is I charge $180 an hour, which is that's like bargain basement rates. But I do it only so that the litigants should take the case seriously, understand that my judgment means something, and they can't later on, if you don't charge anything, people who get a service for free usually don't value it. And so it's important to charge something for time that you have, that you could be using this valuable time for something else for the rest of for your other congregants and so forth. But you are allowed to take compensation for testimony that you are called upon to be a witness for. In other words, not to testify in Beis Din, but to a person, like we said, wants you to come out to Barry to witness a transaction. So you say, I'm happy to help you, but I'm entitled to compensation for providing this service to you. Yesh omrim de mikol makom gam bazeh asrim likach schar yoser mischar betela demuchach. He says, some say that you're not allowed to take more than the time off that you need to take from work, what you could have made on that day, there's a calculus that you make, forget what it was, I think it's about half of what you would normally make during that hour, but since you're doing something that doesn't require a lot of labor and so forth, you would be willing to take less. He says, but if the compensation is for the time off and for the travel time and not for the edus itself, everyone agrees that you're allowed to take compensation for that, and you're also allowed to take compensation so that if your friend says to you, can you find me a witness? And that's going to take you time to track someone down to find them a witness. I don't know why someone would be necessarily involved in that kind of, let's say a guy calls up the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I'm going into a business with another from a Yid. I want to make sure that everything is witnessed properly. Can you find me a witness? The rabbi has to now take time to find someone, so you're allowed to take compensation for that as well. Umitam zeh mutarim Okay, we'll hold it here for today. We'll talk about the get, Mirz Hashem, tomorrow.